Hi, this is Professor Marsh, and this is Accounting 210-0 at Newberry College in the spring of 2022. What I'd like to do right now is to do some of the homework for the various chapters that we've already gone through. I'm going to start with Chapter 2 today. Chapter 2 tests your ability to manipulate equations, which is going to be very important in this course, and so we're going to spend some time on that. Then we're going to talk about the definition of current versus non-current assets and some of the examples of that. And then we're going to talk about the effects that certain transactions have with respect to owner's equity, whether they increase, decrease, or have no impact on owner's equity. And then we'll look at some more calculation of net income or net loss, and then also we will manipulate equations in another exercise in one of your problems. So that's the homework for Chapter 2 was exercises A1, A3, A5, and A6, and then problems A1 and A2. So if you want to get your books open and get those in front of you, we can begin. Okay, so exercise A1 is a simple, straightforward calculation of net income, and they put an equation in front of you, and then they ask you to solve for the missing variable. So revenues minus expenses plus gains minus losses equals net income. And your first question, the first in exercise A1, they give you some numbers, and they give you all the numbers on the left side of the equation. So all you basically have to do is to do the addition and subtraction. And the numbers are $1,250 for revenues minus expenses of $1,100 plus gains of $125 minus losses of $75. And what does that equal? Okay, so there's a question mark here. So that's all we're doing, is we're doing the calculation of net income, and you're seeing that in accounting, net income is revenues minus expenses plus gains minus losses, and that's accounting net income for any particular period. So we're just going to do the math, and when I do this, I just typically put these two together, say that's 150, and that's 50, and they still have a plus sign, right? So I just did the subtraction here. 150 plus the subtraction here gets 50, so 150 plus 50 equals $200. And in accounting, we typically go ahead and put the the monetary units on there too. So I'm putting my dollar signs on there, and there are some people who would consider that to be more correct than putting just the numbers. But that's the first of the problems, relatively straightforward. So let's look at the next one. Let's look at the next one, which is going to ask us to manipulate the equations to solve for a variable that's in the middle of the left-hand side of the equation. So here's our equation. Revenues minus expenses plus gains minus losses equals net income. Okay, so let's take a look at this next example where revenues is the question mark, minus expenses, and they give us a lot of expenses here, 100,755 plus 0 in gains minus 1,550. Okay, put our dollar sign in there, and that equals net income that they tell us is negative. They put it in parentheses, and that's how we write a negative in accounting, negative $485. Okay, so we have to do, how do we isolate this variable? How do we isolate that so that we can figure out what number goes in there? Well, one of the things that we can do is we know that we can add the same amount to each side of an equation and it will still be equal. So let's add 100,755 to this side of the equation, and then we'll also add it to this side, 100,755. So see, what I'm doing is I'm adding equations. Now you probably did this in 6th or 7th grade math, but anyhow, we're going to do that. We do the math and we get, this cancels each other out, so that's 0. So question mark plus 0 plus 0 minus 1550, here's our dollar sign, equals 100,755 minus, right, because it's a negative, 485. And so that's going to be 100,000, see if I can do this in my head, $270. Did I get that correct? Okay, I'm still not done with the problem because we've still got this little guy over here. We don't have the variable, our question mark, and you know, if you were doing algebra or something, you could make this X or Y or A or B or something. You could give it a letter, but we'll just make it a question mark. It stands for revenues. We could call it R. R equals that. So we have to get rid of the 1550. Well, how are we going to get rid of the 1550 on this side of the equation? So we just have what the question mark equals. Well, we're going to add 1550 to both sides. So let's add 1550 to both sides. And do it on this side too, okay, because we're preserving equality. We're adding the same amount to both sides of the equation, keeping it equal. And look, now we have a 0 here, so we got question mark plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 equals whatever the total of these two is. Have you already done it? Have you already done it in your head? Okay, so it's 101,820, and I hope that's what you got. Okay, so that's how you can manipulate equations to isolate the variable that you're searching for when you're just adding it. Okay, this is math that you probably learned and forgot a long time ago, long before you got to college, but that's how you do that. So, okay, everybody clear on that? Everybody's nodding, yes. Okay, good. Let's look at it theoretically. Let's look at it theoretically. Okay, so let's do another one, and let's see if we can have this problem of manipulating equations be something that we can learn the concept about. So let me erase all this. Doing a really lousy job erasing the board here. I might need some helpers to come help erase the board. Hope I don't break the thing. Okay, so get it nice and clean. Everything ready to start again. Okay, let's do the next one, which is, let's see, 75,560, 75,560 minus 68,600 plus question mark. So gains is the variable that we're looking for to try to solve, minus 1675, and that equals net income of 6,485. Okay, I've got our question mark, or our dollar signs rather. Okay, how are we going to figure this guy out? So how are we going to do this? Well, one of the things that might be easy is to do sort of a combination of what we did before. We've got revenues minus expenses. Let's simplify it by getting rid of revenues minus expenses and just turning it into the difference. So we have put these two together, we'll do the math, and we get 6,960 plus question mark minus 1675 equals 6485. So we simplified here. Okay, we did our simplification first. Now, what do we have? Well, we've got 69. Let's get rid of the 1675. So we're going to add 1675 to both sides. And that cancels that out to 0. So now we've got 6960 plus question mark on this side, and then over on this side we've got, it looks like we've gone up to 8,000 and change. 8,100 and, is that 60? Yeah, 8,160. Okay, so we've got 6960 plus question mark plus 0 equals 8160. Now, we can subtract 6960 from both sides. That gets that down to 0, so we've got 0 plus question mark plus 0 equals 8160 minus 6960, and that gets us to our answer, which is $1,200. Okay, so, well, we haven't quite gotten the theory yet, have we? Okay, but here's what we can do, is any time that you're trying to solve for a certain variable, let's go back and do this problem a different way. I went through all the steps, but let's say we're going to try to do it a lot simpler. And I probably erased a little bit too much there, but let's do this one again. Let's do it so maybe we can do it in one step. Wouldn't that be better if we can do it in one step as opposed to having to go through line by line? So what was the beginning? 75, 560? Yeah, 75, 560, 75, 560 minus 68, 600. Oh, sorry, somebody should have turned off his phone. There we go. Okay, so 75, 560 minus 68, 600 plus question mark minus 1675. Well, since we know that if we want to get rid of the 75, 560, we subtract it. If we want to get rid of the 68, 600, we add it. Why don't we just do that all on with one step over on this line? So to get rid of 75, 560, we subtract 75, 560 from both sides. To get rid of the negative 68, 600, we add it to both sides. So I'm adding it to this side, getting rid of it, and I'm adding 68, 600. And on this side, to get rid of the negative 1675, we're adding 1675. Now you can just add this line of figures up in your calculator and you're going to get to the same answer, which is still going to be the $1,200. Okay, so that isolates your little question mark equals which is your gains. Remember, it's a real thing. It's not just a question mark. It's the gains that you're trying to solve for are $1,200. And that's your answer. Okay, now there's a couple more in exercise A1, and I'm going to let you do those all by yourself. Okay, let's do exercise exercise A3. Now this is giving us the accounting equation. So we're going to have another equation that we're going to manipulate. So this was in your homework. We're going to manipulate the accounting equation, which is a little simpler. That's just, remember, it's assets equal liabilities plus owner's equity. And that's not how the book gives it to you. The book kind of gives you a hint that we're going to be manipulating equations, because the book, you know, here's the accounting equation that we have learned to love. Assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity. And if assets equal liabilities plus owner's equity, how do you get owner's equity isolated on this side? Well, you subtract liabilities from both sides, which is what your book did for you. And so you subtract liabilities over here, you do the math, this gives you assets minus liabilities, right? On this side, liabilities minus liabilities is nothing. And so now you've got assets minus liabilities equaling owner's equity. Okay, see how we did that? You don't have to do it with real numbers. You can do it with variables. These names of these different things are the variables. Okay, so when you fill in the numbers, then you're solving the equation. And in this case, your book has done this for you. And since it's a 0, we can get rid of the 0 here. They start and give you this as the accounting equation. Assets minus liabilities equals owner's equity. And then they give you some numbers. They give you some numbers. And the first one they give you is pretty darn easy. 32,000 minus 17,000 equals, and your question marks over here, and you know everybody does this, and they get 15,000. So that's your first one. That's pretty darn easy. Okay, let's do the next one. In the next one, they don't give you the liabilities number. Okay, so in the next one, which is also frankly pretty easy, they give you 168,700 minus question mark equals, and then for owner's equity, they give you 146,300. Okay. All right. Well, let's see. Okay, how do you solve for this one? Now, this is going to they're trying to confuse you with the negative numbers. Okay, so if you do what I've told you to do, which is to subtract 168,700 from both sides to try to zero out what's on this side and isolate the isolate your variable that you're solving for, you subtract this, you get 0 assets, right? Okay, minus liabilities equals, and this is going to give you a negative number. And when you do the math on this, you're going to see that this is 22,400 negative, right? It's one number minus a bigger number gives you a negative number. Okay, well, hey, how about that? So liabilities must be negative 22,400. No, they're not. Remember, you've got negative liabilities here. How do you make a negative a positive? You multiply it by -1 times -1. Now you've got liabilities, because it's now positive, equals a positive number, which is 22,400. Okay, so just be careful. Be careful with the plus and minus signs as you do your homework. If you get a negative number As a result, you probably don't have negative liabilities. That would be an asset, right? Negative liabilities would be an asset. It would be a contra liability. So anyhow, so make sure that you've got your signs right on that. And let's see, did I do one more? I did. Okay, so all right. So let's do D. Let's do the fourth one, which I just called D, but even though it's not really D, but let's do this next one. Okay. So just maybe you do this yourself. Maybe pause the video and see if you can do the one that begins where the assets are 0. Okay, or question. The asset is the variable you're solving for. Minus 232, and that equals 330, 700 in owner's equity. So, okay, so assets minus liabilities equals owner's equity, and this is the fourth one, I think, in the exercise number 3A. So, okay, how do you solve this? Well, this is pretty darn simple. You add 232 to both sides. And you get 562, 700 as assets equal 562, 700. Okay, all right. Sometimes it confuses people that, you know, gee, that number is a lot bigger than what we had over here or over there. But that's because we're solving for assets. Okay, if it was assets equals liabilities plus owner equity, it would be easier to see that you've got 562, 700 equals 232 plus 330, 700. Okay. All right. Okay, so that's that part of the homework. Now let's talk about the other part of the Chapter 2 homework. And let me go ahead and get that up and see if we can figure out where that is. And I'm going to pull it up on my screen. You're not looking at it, you're still looking at me, probably wondering how much closer my face could get to the camera. Sorry about that. But let's get into exercise A and let's look at number 5, and we'll just kind of talk about that. So exercise A, question 5.